I had to kick a brain-injured woman with a crush on one of my players out of my D&D group after she made weeks of chaos, boundary crossing, and emotional manipulation. Now I can't tell if I set a healthy boundary or if I'm just a horrible person. When I first decided to start a D&D group, I honestly didn't expect it to take off. I'd only ever DM'd a few times before, and even then, it was mostly with friends I already knew well. This time was different. I met a bunch of people at a church event, and on a whim, I asked who'd be interested in playing. To my surprise, several people jumped at the chance. I collected phone numbers, set up a Discord server, and somehow ended up with a party of 7 players. I was nervous. 7 was a lot, especially for someone still learning the ropes, but the first couple of sessions went surprisingly well. Everyone clicked, there was laughter, good roleplay, and that electric spark that happens when a story starts to come alive. Then came Jenna. Jenna, 25F, messaged me a couple of weeks after the initial invites went out, saying the Discord link I sent her no longer worked. I remembered her vaguely from that first round of invites. We talked briefly at the church party. During that conversation, she told me she'd been in a serious car accident when she was younger, that she'd suffered a brain injury, and that she had a seizure disorder. She spoke slowly, sometimes interrupted others mid-sentence, but she seemed friendly enough. I told her I already had 7 players, which was my hard limit, but that she could still join the Discord to hang out, maybe watch a session, and if someone dropped out, we could reevaluate. She said she completely understood. I thought that would be the end of it. But as soon as Jenna joined the Discord, things started to feel off. The next time I posted a message about scheduling the next session, she responded in ways that made the whole situation really uncomfortable. Out of nowhere, she started posting messages like, "I'm so sorry I'm in the way. I hope you guys have fun. I don't want to be a burden. I'll shut up." It was weird because no one had said anything to her. No one was being rude or excluding her. We were just trying to schedule a game. I tried to reassure her, told her she wasn't in the way, that it was fine for her to hang out in the chat, and that everything was cool. She apologized, said she understood, and then did it again. Over and over. Every few messages, she'd drop another comment about how she shouldn't be here, or how she didn't want to ruin things. I didn't know how to respond anymore. It wasn't just awkward, it was draining. I could feel the tension growing in the group, even though no one said anything. People started reacting less to her messages, or just ignoring them entirely, which only made her double down with more self-deprecating posts. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, I really didn't. I knew she'd been through a lot, and part of me felt guilty, even feeling annoyed. But at the same time, I had 7 other players depending on me to keep things running smoothly, and I could sense the situation was going to become a bigger issue if I didn't address it soon. I tried to handle the situation delicately. During one of our early sessions, I casually brought up Jenna to a few of the other players. I didn't want to sound judgmental or harsh, so I avoided mentioning the weirder Discord messages or the way she tended to talk over people whenever she chimed in. I just asked, "Hey, how would you guys feel if Jenna joined us for a session or 2? Everyone sort of shrugged. No one said anything against it. I could tell most of them were just trying to be polite, they didn't really know her, and no one wanted to be that person who said no. So I gave in. Jenna officially joined the group. The next day, I messaged her privately to start building her character. Normally, I try to keep things simple for new players, give them a few pre-made sheets so they can learn the game without getting overwhelmed. For this campaign, it was even more important since I was already juggling 7 people and a fairly new story. But Jenna had very specific ideas. She wanted to play a high-elf wild magic sorcerer who, in her words, had a dent in her head. That last part threw me off. It was so oddly personal, clearly a reference to her real-life injury, that I wasn't sure how to react. I gently suggested she pick something a little simpler for her first game, maybe a fighter or cleric, but she brushed it off. "Oh, I've played before," she said. "I know what I'm doing." I wanted to trust her. I really did. But she couldn't even open a PDF file I sent her for basic spell descriptions because of her parents' internet restrictions. She lives with them, and apparently they control all her online access, another red flag I didn't quite know how to address. So, I ended up doing nearly everything for her, writing out spell cards by hand, filling out her character sheet, and streamlining as much as possible to make it easier. Then the day of her first in-person session came around, and that's when things got even more complicated. A few days before game night, she told me she couldn't drive. That wasn't a huge deal. Someone could give her a ride, or maybe her parents could drop her off. But then she casually mentioned, "Oh, I have to be in bed by 10 p.m. We usually start at 8 o'clock. That meant she'd have to leave by 9 o'clock, basically 1 hour of gameplay before she'd need to pack up and go. So I tried to make it work. Sure, fine. Her dad could come pick her up, problem solved. At least that's what I thought. It seemed like the simplest way to handle it. I didn't want to inconvenience anyone else in the group, especially since she'd only be staying for about an hour anyway. Except, that's not what happened. When the night of the session rolled around, her dad didn't show. Instead, she arrived with one of the girls in the group, Angela. Sweet, kind, soft-spoken Angela, who had the kind of personality that made her incapable of saying no to anyone. The second they walked in, I could tell something was off. Angela gave me this tight, forced smile, the kind that said, "Please don't ever make me do that again." Jenna, meanwhile, was her usual talkative self, greeting everyone loudly, like she'd been part of the group forever. I didn't have time to dig into what happened on the drive there, because people were already rolling dice and setting up their character sheets. I figured I'd check in with Angela later. That's when I noticed the next problem, Jenna's behavior toward one of the other players, Tom. Now, Tom's the kind of guy who's nice to everyone, maybe a little too nice for his own good. He's patient, friendly, but definitely not the type to flirt. Still, from the moment Jenna walked in, it was like a switch flipped. She was glued to him. If Tom sat down, she'd move her chair closer. If Tom said something, she'd interrupt him just to agree loudly. At one point, she started laughing at everything he said, things that weren't even jokes. And then came the line that made the entire room go dead silent. She said, "I had a dream that Tom proposed to me." Everyone sort of froze, unsure if they were supposed to laugh or pretend they hadn't heard. But she didn't stop there. She said it again, and again, 3 separate times, just to make sure everyone heard. Tom just sat there, smiling awkwardly, clearly mortified but too polite to call her out. Later, I'd find out they'd known each other since middle school, but he'd never expressed any interest in her. I tried to redirect the attention back to the game, moving the story forward and asking people to roll dice, but Jenna was impossible to ignore. She interrupted constantly, repeated stories over and over, and often talked right over whoever was speaking. Still, I told myself to stay calm. She wasn't being malicious, just unaware. And, to her credit, she did try to play. Tom ended up helping her with her character sheet the entire session. Every time her turn came up, she'd look at him and ask, "What do I roll?" Or, "What should I do?" He was patient, too patient, and I could tell it was draining him, but it kept things moving, so I let it slide. Surprisingly, the session itself went okay. Better than I expected, honestly. She didn't have a seizure or cause a major disruption. Sure, she talked a lot and dominated conversations, but everyone was polite enough to roll with it. And then, around 10:45 p.m., I asked, "Hey Jenna, do you need to head out soon? Didn't you say your bedtime was 10? She just waved me off. "Oh, it's fine. My parents said I can stay out later as long as I call them." So apparently, the bedtime thing wasn't that strict after all. By the end of the night, everyone was packing up, and I asked who was taking her home. I assumed Angela would, since she'd driven her there. But Jenna refused. "I don't feel comfortable riding in a car with a stranger," she said. I want to point out that Angela wasn't a stranger. She'd literally just spent an hour in her car, but I didn't bother. Instead, Jenna turned to Tom and asked him for a ride. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Yeah, sure. I can take you." And that was that. Jenna showed up to the next session in full costume, crown, bracers, glittery cape, the whole deal. At first, I thought it was kind of cute. Everyone laughed and complimented her, and for a moment, it felt like things might actually go smoothly. That feeling didn't last. Almost immediately, she asked Tom to help her take off her crown because it was stuck in her hair. He did it, awkwardly. Then, 5 minutes later, she asked him to take off her bracers because they were too tight. The room went quiet. Tom sighed, helped her again, and everyone looked away. From that moment, she was glued to him. She refused help from anyone else. Every question went through him. "Tom, what do I roll? Tom, can you tell me what spell to use? Tom, what does this number mean?" I tried to guide her, but she'd shut me down with, "No, I just want Tom to help." It slowed the entire session down to a crawl. Combat that should have taken 15 minutes dragged for nearly an hour. You could feel everyone's patience wearing thin. Players stopped role-playing, stopped joking around. Then came her rules. Mid-session, she suddenly said, "Can we stop cursing? It's really inappropriate." She looked straight at 2 players she clearly didn't like. They glanced at me, unsure how to respond. I awkwardly said, Let's just keep it clean. But it killed the mood. Every time I described a battle, if I mentioned blood or anything remotely graphic, she'd gasp or loudly say, That's so gross. It threw everyone off. Then, out of nowhere, she announced she was writing a book about our campaign, specifically mentioning Tom multiple times. You could practically hear the air leave the room. Predictably, when it was time to leave, she refused a ride from Angela, who'd driven her, because she didn't feel comfortable with strangers. Instead, she insisted Tom drive her home. He gave me this helpless look before sighing and agreeing. I thought that'd be the end of it. But a few days later, one of the other players, John, mentioned in the group chat that he had a space-themed adventure module he might run someday. Most of us just reacted with emojis. Jenna, though, fixated on it immediately. She messaged me privately, saying she wanted to run her own campaign. She even sent me an AI-generated outline about a Peter Pan-inspired cosmic adventure. It barely made sense. I tried to be gentle, saying that being a DM takes a lot of work and that maybe we could start smaller first.
She didn't take it well.
She accused me of gatekeeping and said she'd played for years and could handle it. By the end of that chat, I was mentally drained. I didn't have the energy to fight or explain. I just told her we'd talk more about it later. By this point, I was completely drained. Every interaction with Jenna had become a tightrope walk between managing her feelings and keeping the rest of the group from falling apart. After her last argument about running her own campaign, I finally snapped, not in anger, but in exhaustion. I told her bluntly, "You can't run a campaign if you can't even find your HP on your character sheet." It was harsh, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Strangely, that's when she finally decided to start listening to me. Suddenly, she wanted to hear my concerns about her character and asked what I thought she should do differently. I told her as gently as I could. Maybe try something simpler. She agreed. Said she'd make a new character and even thanked me for the advice. But of course she didn't. In the meantime, I reached out to Tom and Angela privately. I needed to know if I was overreacting, if maybe I was being too sensitive or impatient. Tom, who had been the center of her obsessive attention, sighed and said he was used to it. He didn't want to be cruel, but he admitted he wanted her gone. Angela was hesitant, clearly didn't want to sound mean, but after a little prompting, she admitted she was uncomfortable driving Jenna anywhere again. That was enough confirmation for me. It wasn't just in my head. Everyone was uneasy. So I took action. I messaged Jenna directly and asked her if she thought she could play D&D without help, without someone walking her through every role, every line of her sheet, every decision. She hesitated and said, "I don't know." That was my answer. I told her I didn't think our group could accommodate her needs, that we had a lot of new players already and it was hard enough balancing everyone's learning curves. I tried to keep it neutral and professional. She immediately got upset. Her messages came rapid fire, full of apologies and self-blame. "I'm sorry I'm such a burden. I just feel like I'm a burden to literally everybody in my life. The main reason I joined this group was to find a sense of belonging. I guess I just don't belong anywhere. I'm used to being kicked out." Each message was harder to read than the last. I felt awful, but I also knew I couldn't back down, not this time. The group was falling apart because no one had the courage to draw a boundary. After a few more back and forths, I realized I had to say it clearly. "Jenna," I typed, "I think it's best if you don't come anymore." She sent a few more apologies, saying she didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable and that she was just trying to make friends. But then her tone shifted. She started saying things like, "I understand if everyone hates me, and I ruin everything." That's when I drew the line. I told her, "It's okay to feel upset, but this kind of talk is emotionally manipulative. You can't keep apologizing like this to make people feel guilty. Please stop." It was one of the hardest messages I've ever sent. I hated saying it, but it had to be said. After that, she went quiet. No reply. No goodbye. Just silence. And now, even though I know I did what needed to be done, I can't shake the guilt. Did I do the right thing? Or did I just kick out someone who genuinely needed kindness because I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to give it?